Hello. So for the resolving an ethical dilemma, I chose to focus on two brothers who were currently at that time homeless, living in an abusive home environment, and they did not have stable housing for the night. And as background context, these two brothers were clients of ours. They had moved out of county to Virginia and then were sent back to Erie County by their uncle and were just on the run. Their parents were abusive. Their parents have many CPS cases open against them, neglect charges pending, a very unsafe, unwelcoming environment for the brothers. And we were made aware of their situation through a social media post. They had been clients of ours leading up until they left Virginia for Virginia. And then when they came back, we found out about their situation and decided that it was in their best interest for us to help them because we had developed relationships with them at our agency and we felt like we could provide them with assistance because they had been justice involved and now they were homeless. In addition to that, there are not many homeless shelters in the Buffalo area for youth. And knowing that, we knew that this was very time sensitive, that we find out where the brothers were, bring them back to our office, and figure out a game plan for them. So we knew that because there were no shelters really in the area, that there was but one shelter. And we knew that that shelter was not accepting to the brothers because they had broken rules in the past. So we were kind of at a crossroads what to do with the boys. It's either let them go back to an abusive home or drop them off at home, which we knew was abusive and was not in their best interest. Anytime they go back to that home, they leave, they go AWOL, and we don't hear from them. Usually the parents take their phones, take their clothes, um, make them endure some pretty harsh physical punishments. So it was either let them go back to that environment, or in our heads, it was also let them fend for themselves on the streets. So when we found the boys, we had learned that they had been living in underpasses, in abandoned buildings, anywhere that they could find, really, for about 3 weeks. And they were emaciated when they came to us and just desperate for some sort of respite. We fed them, we clothed them, we let them sleep for a little bit in our office just to give them some peace because they clearly had not had food or shelter for a very, very long time. Um, so the as time went on, as the day went on, we were not receiving any information from the Office of Child and Family Services that we contacted. We did not receive any adequate information from CPS, who we contacted, since we are mandated reporters. It was pretty much find somewhere for them to stay. And we exhausted all of our efforts. The homeless shelter was not accepting to them at that point in time and didn't even have beds available if they wanted to be accepting to them. And they're also minors, so that limits their options a little bit. And they did not want to be separated from one another, rightfully so. So the two competing courses of action were allowing the boys to go to some sort of respite with a trusted adult, or have the boys find their own shelter or attempt to return to their abusive home. So as the day progressed and in my management position, it became very clear that those were the only two courses of action. Allow them to go to respite with a trusted adult. And in this scenario, it would be their case manager, or it would be send them back home, or make them kind of fend for themselves. So that ethical obligation with allowing the boys to go to respite with a trusted adult would be making sure that the boys have, excuse me, safe shelter for the night. We wanted them to have somewhere they could rest their heads, they could take a nice warm shower, and then we can game plan the next day when we have more time. We did not find the boys till later in the afternoon that day, so we didn't have much time to develop some sort of plan for them, and we were kind of left from the larger systems and powers that be to figure it out ourselves, which is unfair as we don't have housing options for the boys. We are strictly reentry services, but we didn't have any options. And the other course of action in being that the boys find their own shelter or attempt them to return them home would be following and adhering to our internal procedures and protocol. We try not to blur any lines with the youth. We don't want them to, it's hard sometimes when we develop relationships with them to define where that friendship ends and that case manager ends too. So we don't want to ever toe, we toe the line sometimes. It gets very complicated not to cross over that line into some sort of friendship zone or some sort of zone that makes them perpetuate the issue or just exasperates the issue. So those were the two competing courses of action and ethical obligations. And especially coming from a director, a management position, I have a responsibility to adhere to our internal processes and our internal procedures. But as time went on, as I began gathering more information, listening to the boys speak, watching their mannerisms, talking with their case manager, it became very clear to me that, if they were to go to that respite with their trusted adult, which would be their case manager, who they had worked very closely with, they feel very comfortable around her, that value from the NASW Code of Ethics would be the dignity and worth of the person, right? The standard would be treating each person with care and respect, and that we have a dual responsibility to clients and broader society. So ethically speaking, I did not feel comfortable allowing these boys to just figure it out for themselves. They could they were sleeping in underpasses. They could end up at a house or a home of some sort that was unsafe for them, and they had been living in unsafe environments with people who did not have their best interests in mind. And just forcing them to figure it out did not sit well with us, as these are boys. They are under the age of 18. One was 15, maybe 14 at the time, and then the other was, around the age of 17, maybe 16 at the time. So they were young. They were defenseless. They did not have the tools to figure it out for themselves, and there's no options available in the area for them. On the other hand, when, consulting the NASW Code of Ethics and in trying to make the most informed decision possible, adhering to that internal procedure and, having the boys not go home with a case manager, even though she had plenty of room, she had a separate refinished basement space where they would be separated from everybody else with their own shower, their own toilet. She would make sure they were clothed, fed up bright and early the next morning, and, just to figure out what they were going to do next. That value that aligned with adhering to those internal policies would be the value of integrity. I have a responsibility to promote those ethical practices as part of the organization that I am affiliated with. And veering from that would, it undermines the integrity of the institution and from myself as well as the director of the program. Speaking more about the dignity and worth of the person, if the choice would be to allow them to go home with a trusted adult, that dual responsibility to the clients and broader society would be to, from my viewpoint, allowing the clients respite with a trusted adult where they feel safe, where they feel secure, they have a roof over their head, they have food in their stomachs, they have clean clothes, they are clean themselves, into broader society, not allowing these youth to just sleep in underpasses or break into the local baseball field, which they did. They broke into the baseball field complex and were eating hot dogs and were caught by a security guard, and he thankfully realized the situation they were in and allowed them to leave. And this was prior to us finding them, of course. So the broader society would the responsibility to broader society would be us finding shelter for them, so they're not breaking into homes, they're not breaking into businesses, and also advocating for them, right? For broader society, we're advocating for more resources, more opportunities where they could find housing, advocating as much as we possibly can for CPS. There's something be done, because that was very difficult for us to advocate for CPS, for something to be done instead of just allowing them to go back on the streets. They were and are at-risk youth, so they have a higher level of needs and are more likely to recidivate. Case in point, they broke into a business and were eating food, were seeking shelter. Luckily, a kind security guard allowed them to leave and, gave them whatever food they wanted and ushered them out. But finding that respite with a trusted adult would give them the security and safety they would need to regroup and plan for the next day. So in considering these two options, allowing them to go to respite with a trusted adult, or allowing them to just go back to what they were doing and hoping that we catch up with them the next day, give them a cell phone, hope they find a charge, some sort of charging port for it, or an electrical outlet so we can keep in touch. Those two options weighed very heavily on me, and I determined that the standard that would win out would be dignity and worth of the person. I agreed to allow the case manager to take the boys home for one night only. We got the boys kind of later in the day, not enough time to case plan for them. Not enough time for CPS apparently to make a decision. We did not hear back from any other agencies. Again, we were left to kind of just figure it out ourselves. Hey, can you find somewhere for them to stay? Knowing that there's really nowhere for them to stay. So I agreed to allow the case manager to take the boys home for one night. Strict measures in place. They only can stay in that refinished basement, food, clothing, bed at a certain time, up at a certain time the next day, text me, so that they would not end up on the streets. The boys would then have assistance that following day to find stable housing. More options would be open in terms of businesses being open, that homeless shelter might have an extra bed or two. Or if we get to CPS early in the morning, they would have more time in the day to help us case plan. Office of Child and Family Services, same thing. Get to them early. They would help us develop a case plan. So it was, for me, determined that I could not morally or ethically allow these minors just to go sleep on the streets. They were sleeping in the outdoors. They have in the past displayed concerning behavior, attaching themselves to certain people to get what they need to survive, and that was a major concern. So that decision was made to preserve the safety of the two young boys who had no housing. They had to either go back on the street or go back to an extremely abusive house that they would have run away from anyway. Had we had dropped them off, they would have perhaps stayed for a couple of hours, but inevitably they would have left, as was the pattern anytime someone would drop them back off home. And then from there, they would look for shelter in other unsafe homes or environments. And also dropping them off to that abusive home would have destroyed the relationship that we had made, that case manager had made with the boys, putting them into a situation that would be abusive, and has been abusive, would have completely destroyed their trust in us. And they would not feel compelled to seek our help or to work with us in the future. And that was another fear. So the standard that went out was dignity and worth of a person, so that we could preserve their safety. And then we could case plan the next day to help them find adequate shelter, which we did. We were able to get them into more suitable housing for a brief period of time. And then OCFS and CPS, all the entities that have been working with these boys outside of us, were able to assist them as well. Thank you.